Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today's portion is Numbers 13, 14, and 15. And I'm not going to try to touch on all of them. I'm going to try to get as much of 13 and 14. We'll go through that as much as we have time for. So before we get started into that portion of the scripture, I want to kind of set this up and give kind of an introduction on what the children of Israel, what Israel has been through for the past year and 2 months, starting with the Exodus from slavery and from bondage. So we're going to kind of back up just a little bit, and we'll pick up, because I want some of these things that they've gone through to be fresh on your mind where we go over some of the 13 and 14. So, God has brought the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and has brought them to the wilderness of Paran. For what should have been the final stop before Israel is to step out in faith into the purpose that Adonai was placing upon them. Adonai had promised to give this land of blessing and provision. In return, Adonai wanted them to believe and to be obedient. The promised land wasn't just going to be a place for them to live. It was going to be a place for them to fulfill what God had called them to do. He had called the nation of Israel to be a light to the nations. And this was where they were supposed to go in and possess the land and start to fulfill what their purpose is. The children of Israel, this generation, had witnessed Adonai's mighty hand of deliverance and provision. They were eyewitnesses to the plagues brought upon the Egyptians to gain their freedom from bondage and slavery. They were delivered from Pharaoh's army as Israel crossed the Sea of Reeds, then turned and watched the destruction of Pharaoh's army as they tried to pursue them. From there, Israel enters the wilderness, and after 3 days, they come to the waters of Marah. So they've been 3 days into the wilderness and no water. So what did they do when they hit an obstacle? Just like whenever they hit the obstacle of the Red Sea, what did they do? They grumbled against Moses. They grumbled against him. The scripture doesn't say that they grumbled against Adonai, but they grumbled against Moses. So they continue, and they're 3 days into the wilderness, and they come to the waters of Marah, and they're thirsty. And they get there, and they can't drink the water. It's bitter. So they hit another obstacle. What did they do? They grumble. They grumble against, not against Adonai, but they grumble against Moses.
One they can see.
That the leadership that Adonai has placed in authority over them. But they're just learning this. They're just right out there. So it's going to be too hard on them. Sometimes it's a learning process.
Yes.
And Adonai hears their cries. Here's the grumbling that they're grumbling to Moses. And he provides Moses a tree that makes the water sweet. And he provides he quenches their thirst with not just water, but sweet water. Then Adonai leads them into the wilderness of sin, and Bnei Israel becomes hungry. What do they do when they become hungry? They grumble to who? To Moses. They grumble to Moses.
We have a job here to die.
Yep. And once they get into the wilderness, there's something they add into this that comes back and kind of bites on them later in chapter 14 of our portion. What is the one thing that they continually say when they're grumbling to Moses?
You're better off.
That's one of them. But the other one is, you brought us out here into this wilderness to die.
Yep, absolutely.
You brought us out here to die. So keep that. That's one of the things that I want you keep your mind as we go through this.
Okay.
So after they grumble to Moses, Adonai hears their cry. He provides them meat in the evening and bread in the morning. And Israel journeyed from the wilderness of sin, and they camped at Rephidim. But there was no water to drink. So they come to another spot where there's no water. And they've seen God's provision. They've seen the miracles of protection and deliverance. You'd think that by now they would start to kind of say, well, what's God going to do? And expecting God to do something on their behalf to quench their thirst. But instead, again, they grumble to their leadership. They grumble to Moses. And God, Adonai, has Moses go to the rock of Horeb, and he strikes the rock, and water comes out of the rock to quench their thirst. And Israel is then led by Adonai to Mount Sinai. And Adonai gives them the law, teaching them how he wants to be worshipped. Not just to worship, but how he wants, what he is going to require them to do in worship. God wants to be worshipped a specific way. It's not how we want to do it, but how God has told us he wants to be worshipped. And we shouldn't take that lightly. Adonai gives Israel instruction on how to live, how to cohabit with each other. He confirms his covenant with Bnei Israel. And soon after that, Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, and he tarries there. And they do what?
Isn't that where they kind of lose their mind and
They rebel, and the whole golden calf
yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
occurs right here. They don't know what's happened, what's become of this man who knows it. They kind of distance themselves by saying, this man. That's whenever you hear a statement like that, they're just distancing themselves and not really wanting to be a part of it. And so then we have the rebellion with the golden calf. Then Moses comes down, and we know how that goes, and he has to plead with Adonai on behalf of Israel. Then from Sinai, then we're kind of getting closer to our portion here. This is just a week or two ago in our studies. Then in the second month of the second year, Adonai led Israel out of Sinai and into the wilderness of Paran. Then some began to do what? Grumble and complain.
Seems to be a pattern here.
There's a pattern that I want you to see. Even Miriam and Aaron get into the act and confront Moses. They're confronting God's anointed leader over their congregation. Be careful. Be careful when you do that.
Amen.
Confrontation is generally not a good thing when it's against Adonai.
But this whole time, you see what they're doing. The people are grumbling against Moses.
Right.
Sometimes they throw Aaron in there too. They're not, in their mind, maybe they're not thinking. They're grumbling against Adonai.
Well,
They're going to find that out.
It's easy for us to look back and
It is.
make all kinds of, well, we don't know, we weren't walking that walk.
Well,
I mean, look
we'll
at
get to that. We'll get there, I hope. I hope we don't run out
I
of
think
time.
there is one thing too. It says that they were on account of the Ethiopian woman that he married. So I mean, there's prejudice along with
Yeah.
thrown in here.
Is that something that they just threw out there, or were they really jealous of Moses?
Well, they were jealous, but I said they were using every kind of
They
weapon
threw
they
that out
could.
there,
Kind of like politicians.
right?
I was about to say, it kind of sounds like
We don't
the
have that
American
problem
people
here.
now with our
Yeah.
leadership. We
Yeah,
complain
you
and we
think?
grumble because we don't like what they're doing, but we're no different than what the Israelites were doing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
In each of these instances where Adonai provided a miracle, whether it was provision or deliverance, there was one thing that always happened. The people grumbled against Moses.
Yep.
Every time an obstacle was encountered, the people grumbled against Moses. So here we come to our Torah portion. And I'm going to try to pronounce how it says it in Hebrew. But there's pronunciations in here that's not in my English language. Shalak lakah. And it's that real guttural
Oh, yeah.
sound. So go ahead, help me out there.
No. What verse are you on?
It's it'd be verse 2 where basically where you see in our portion where it says sin for yourself. That's what the Hebrew translation for what the portion is. Sin for yourself. And it's talking about Moses. Sin for Moses.
Yeah, I read them all the time too, so just go on, everybody knows.
I've heard yours and it's much better than mine. And what we see in verses 1 through 3, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send out for yourself men, so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran at the command of the Lord, all of the men who were heads of the sons of Israel. Now Adonai, he clearly spoke his instruction saying, send out for yourself, which in Hebrew means the word that I couldn't pronounce just a few minutes ago, our Torah portion, the title of it, which is where we get the name of this Torah portion. Adonai makes the promise in reference to the land, which I'm going to give to the sons of Israel. So Moses sent them out to spy out or to investigate the land. The men that were chosen were leaders in their tribes. I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible, and it translates heads of the sons of Israel. The Tree of Life version calls them prince of the tribe of his father. So these were leaders. These were men of influence. There were men of persuasion. Think about what you would see of a leader in today, what qualities you would see in a leader. They're persuasive. They lead the way. People follow what they say. They can either sway it for one purpose or for another purpose.
Good or evil.
One thing to note in who they sent. I'm not going to go through all of the names, but they list each tribe and the person and the leader that was chosen to go out and spy out the land. The Levites were excluded from this group. They were excluded from something later in the portion 2 that we'll get to. But the Levites weren't counted in the same census as what the rest of the tribes were. They were set apart for God's purpose with the tabernacle. So we're skipping down to verse 17 through 20 reads, when Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there into the Negev, then go up into the hill country and see what the land is like, and whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and how is the land in which they live? Is it good or bad? And how are the cities in which they live? Are they like open camps with fortifications? Or with fortifications? And how is the land? Is it fat or lean? Are there trees in it or not? Make an effort then to get some of the fruit of the land. Now it was now the time of the first ripe grapes, that we know how they went in there and they brought back this huge cluster, single cluster that two men had to carry on a pole. When Moses sent them out, he gave very specific instructions. He gave them directions on which way to go. They were to start in the Negev, in the lower country, and they were to work up into the hill country. There's been some rabbis' opinions that I've read that say Moses was kind of using some salesmanship here. He was wanting them to go to the dry land and to the more barren land, and then he wanted them to move up into the more fertile land, into the hill country. So that would be the last thing on their mind when they came back. Now, the word doesn't specifically say that, but that's not a bad opinion from that. So he's really, Moses was very specific, so I can see that happening in how he had them travel. Moses he gave specific instructions on what they were to find out. He wanted to know about the land, whether it's good or bad. Are the cities fortified? Now, if you look back and do some studies, you can see some of the cities in the land of ancient Canaan. The walls were 30 to 50 feet tall. So that's especially back in that day, that's a very formidable fortification, and up to 15 feet thick. If you remember the story, whenever they actually go into the promised land and there had the two spies at Jericho, they stay in Rahab's house, and that house is built in the wall, so it was thick enough for them to actually build a home in it and a structure. And so the spies, they go out and they do what Moses has charged them with. They go the route that he tells them to go with. They bring back some of the fruit, and they come back and they were to make their report on what they found. So we're going to go on down to verses 25 and 26, 21 through 24. We'll read that. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehoboth Hamath. When they had gone up into the Negev, they came to Hebron, where Ahiman and Sheshai and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were. Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and from there they cut down the branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two men with some of the pomegranates and the figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the sons of Israel had cut from there. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran. I want to stop right there because this is where I think you have the first deviation from what Moses instructed them to do. In the first, in the second verse of the chapter, send out for yourself. God is telling Moses, send these spies out for yourself. He didn't say send them out for the people or for the congregation. Send them out for yourself. So we get them coming back. They come to Moses and they come to Aaron and they bring a report. They bring back a report on behalf of Moses, but they returned and gave a report to the entire congregation. And that's not what they were supposed to do. They're supposed to come back and give that report to Moses. And these were leaders, like I said earlier, men of persuasion, men of influence, and they began to transfer their lack of faith and their fear. They began to transfer that fear onto the entire congregation, and just and their belief, their disbelief in Adonai. So you have the entire congregation being infected by a report that should not have even been given to the rest of the congregation.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thus they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. They showed them what they brought back. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. They begin speaking truth of a very fruitful land, very abundant in provision. But when we get to verse 28, we get a very qualifying statement at the beginning of that verse. The NASB has the word nevertheless, and the TLB uses the word except. Except. And they go on to describe the strength of the people and the size of the fortified cities, rather than remembering the strength and power of Adonai, who had promised to give them the land. In verse 29, they continue to discourage the congregation by listing all the different groups of people that are inhabiting that land. And I've read some commentaries to where, as they're listing all of these groups of people and where these people are staying, where they're living, they're basically saying, hey, there's no way for us to get in. There's no place. Each way we go, we're going to encounter a group of people who physically look bigger than us. They look stronger than us. Their cities are fortified. Mm-hmm. We're not strong enough to do it. Then we get to verse 30, and we have Caleb. He's listening to all this, and Caleb's got faith. He knows what God has promised him, and he sees that the people are being persuaded into rebellion, and he tries to put a stop to it. Verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession, for we shall surely overcome it. Now he's saying we shall surely overcome it, but he's looking at this through the eyes of the promise that was restated back in verse 2. I will give you this land.
Whereas the others
Good point,
are
good point.
not looking at the promise, they're looking at their human eyes.
Yeah.
And
We'll see how they describe this in the next verses. 31. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone, in spying it out, is a land that devours its inhabitants. All the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There we saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. And we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. So through this passage of scripture, you can see what the 10 spies who are lacking in faith, what their perception is. All of their perception is what they saw. What we saw this, we saw that, and then they even speculate and they say, we appeared as grasshoppers to them. They don't know what they appeared. If they had really searched out and saw the way the people of that land saw them, they would have seen that the Canaanites and all of the groups, they were scared to death.
Yeah.
The spies that
Come
are
on,
scared,
bro,
that's
come
why they
on.
lie. Saying they're Nephilim is a flat out lie. It's spinning the story.
They were spinning it. But you've got, if they had really got, go ahead.
So, kind of a two-part question. If God had already said, I'm giving you this land, do you have any opinion on why would he send it? Why send out spies, for one thing? And then what's the cost of not sending out spies? So if he had already purposed this land for them, what was the reason for the spies?
I've had that question too. I mean, if he didn't say, I may give this to you, he says, I'm giving you this land. So wouldn't that be a sign of a lack of faith?
Right.
But God told them.
God told them to do
He
it.
said, the Lord spoke to Moses in verse 1, send out for your
Right, but I mean, do you have, what is your opinion on why?
I think God knew that their faith was weak, and he was trying to
That's
send
it.
them out there to try to build their faith. We got a lot of hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a pattern for us even today. When he tells you something, even when we read, he'll tell you something, he says, okay, now you have to walk in this faith, you gotta activate it. If he promises us all these things, he promises to us, but you gotta activate that faith. So you showing that you step out on his word that he told us already, lay that out for us, and activate it. Let that line, let it come, let it doesn't come. It's already got our name on it.
Right.
We have to activate that.
Yes.
I think that's one part of it.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the end of verse 32, it says that the land through which we have gone in spying out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw are men of great size. That right there is such a contradiction.
Yeah.
If the land devours its inhabitants, how are the people of great size? So you ask the question, why did they go in? They saw the reality. They saw two realities. They saw a reality of huge, big people, but they saw the land of abundance that created those huge, big people. So God shows us all the time blessings that are just myriad around us. And Satan shows us how he can twist all of that we see into a lie.
Yes.
And we sit here and we decide, what are we going to believe? Are we going to believe the true God, or are we, and God tells us all the time what he's going to do for us,
Yeah.
or are we going to believe the twisted reality? And so what happened is their new point of view of being as grasshoppers became their reality.
And there's no mention in this passage on how Adonai sees them.
Yes.
Right. That's the key to the whole thing, is how does God see you?
Or,
I have a very strange opinion. That the Nephilim first showed up in Genesis 6, which is after the Lord said, I'm going to bring a seed from the woman who's going to crush your head. So the Nephilim have always show up where Israel's going to show up because they want to mess the bloodline. And they're supernatural, but they saw something real. But what the Lord wants them to know is, I am even over that. I'm bigger than that.
Yes.
Because, and you gotta remember, Paul tells us everything that we read here is for an example, because we're gonna, remember, prophecy goes in circles. So we're all gonna go through this, and again, we're gonna have this opportunity.
We go through this
Yeah.
in our lives all the
Yeah.
time.
And there will be though a second Exodus, and I don't know what that entails, but all the things that happened in the first one will happen in the second one. And so this is something with supernatural. I can already see this happening. Is that men take steroids so they can have superhuman strength to do things. Our heroes in the movies now are superheroes that are beyond human.
Fictitious, or, right?
Yeah, but we're being ready for the day when we can have men plus. And we're going to honor them. And when the patriarchs, when Jacob left the land, there was no talk of Anak or these people there. When he left, there was no talk of Abraham encountering them. The Hittites were kind of the bad boys of the land when they left. So what happens when you have someone who is aggressive and warlike like the Hittites, everyone else will try then to match them. It will be an escalation of weaponry. And someone called somewhere and said, come help us. So then you have the giants, the supernatural, bring in to defeat, the people, the human beings who are not treating other human beings properly, and being aggressive with them and overruling them and oppressing them. So rather than calling on the God of Israel, they went to and pulled out, their own weapons. They built their cities up and brought in someone who they thought could defeat the aggression that was going on. That's probably what happened.
Yeah, they're looking through the main point is that they're looking through their own eyes and not.
Yeah.
thank
We
you.
got 3 hands back there. We're gonna start here and then
Then
here.
there, and then there.
Yeah, we're gonna go right across.
All right,
Then we
makes
gotta
it
move.
easy, okay. So, we already know that the reason that Moses didn't get to go into the promised land is because he struck the rock. And God already knew that. And so, one of the reasons, and even if they had said, yes, we're gonna go, Moses still wasn't gonna get to go.
Right.
And this report was for Moses. So it was a very sweet gift, one, first of all, that the Lord gave Moses, because he said, send them in for yourself. So you can know, so you can hear firsthand, because once they went across the river, they did not come back. You know, they went across and they were in battle to claim the land that the Lord had already given them. He was giving it into their hands, but they were going to have to work for it.
Yes.
Second of all, if you're going to go into battle, you need to know the land that you're walking into. Is it marsh? Is it this? Do we have
Right.
alligators?
Right.
Do we have?
Wisdom.
And the answer to that was yes. You know, and this is where that's at, and this is where that's at. And, you know, do you send someone that's afraid of waters, you know, into the alligator swamp? I don't know that I would do that. We'll put him up in the hills, you know. And so just tactically, that makes good sense as well. But we need to realize that, one, the Lord wasn't surprised.
Basically, the whole point of that was their eyes were on the problem, not the solution that they had.
Yes.
And Adonai is their powerful God who had delivered them through so many things already. So we get to chapter 14. Then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried and wept that night. And all the sons of Israel did what? They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Be careful what you say.
Oh, yeah.
Be very careful what you say, because God is listening.
Oh, yes.
Be careful what you proclaim over yourself. What we say matters.
Yes, it
It
does.
has meaning, and it has consequences at times.
Absolutely.
In being a parent, be careful what you say to your children.
Amen.
Be careful what you call your children. If you have a rebellious child and for 10 years you're talking about when he's small, you're saying, you're so rebellious, you're so rebellious. Don't be surprised if at 16 years old, he's going to be what? He's going to be rebellious. You've been proclaiming that word over him all this time. Be careful what you say. Our words have meaning, and they have consequences. Not just to us, but to our children and to whoever you're speaking to. You're speaking over them, and God's always listening. That's going to be something that's going to come back and going to be a point later on. And why is this Lord bringing us into this land to fall by this? This is the first time that I see in the whole story of them coming out that they say, why did this Lord bring us out to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt.
You know, sometimes we take it for granted when they come out of Egypt. Like if we, as for today, as far as time is concerned, I'll show a picture here that we would have went into Egypt in the 1600s, and we would just be getting out. So these guys was used to, they grew up down there. That's all they knew.
That's what they knew.
Yeah, okay, that's all.
Israel went into complete rebellion and was ready to appoint for themselves a new leader and just go back. We're going to verses 5 through 10. We're getting into a very touchy situation here where there starts to become a little bit of chaos. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation. They're going to give it one last attempt to try to persuade them not to rebel against God. The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. Not just good, but exceedingly good, abundant.
Thank you, Lord.
If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey.
Come on.
Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people, for they shall be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And I can see the desperation in them, because they see the congregation and the rebellion that is stirring against Moses and Aaron, and the promised land. God's promise is right there. They reached out, they walked on it just a few days before. They touched God's promise, and they were coming back out to try to lead the people into that, and they rebel against him. And verse 10, but the congregation said to stone them with stones. And then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. Now we've got, I think what spurred the Lord to come on is he's got faithful men that are serving him fully, Joshua and Caleb and Moses. And he sees the congregation, they're picking up stones, and they're getting ready to stone their leaders and then choose somebody and go back to Egypt. And God comes down and he says, enough. It stops right here. And can you imagine if you were one of the congregation, and you stood there and picked up a rock and you saw the glory of God come down into that tent, what would you be doing? You'd be dropping that rock. I'm not going to be sitting there holding the rock. And the father comes in to see the children. And he sees what's going on.
Yes. But, you know, this lesson is so powerful. It's one of the greatest lessons in the Torah. Because you know what? All of us sitting down here every Shabbat hearing God's word. And to me, teacher, what are you hearing? What do you hear when God speaks? Where is your faith when sickness takes your body? I mean, all these leaders were coming up every Shabbat morning, hear Moses and Aaron. And you tell me about Joshua and Caleb, hear what God was saying? Brethren, we are all in the congregation of the righteous. But are we trusting God? Because there's a test coming. I'm telling you, our walk will be tested. Whether by sickness, whether by finance, whether by, I mean, you name it. What are we going to do? Because the Bible said there was another spirit in Joshua and Caleb.
Right. Different spirit.
What you gonna do?
The saying that many will be called, but few will be chosen. That's a perfect picture of it. 10 went, they all saw the same thing.
The same thing,
but through 10 different sets of eyes, and only 2 saw the promise of God.
I think this is really interesting foreshadow into what happens with the disciples when everything falls apart and they start trying to go back to what they knew. You know, that is not a new thing. It's not a new concept. How many times have we gotten to that brick wall and gone, oh, well, guess I can't go this way, better go back the way I came, instead of believing that God is going to demolish that wall, have us march around it shouting for 7 days, and then breaking those walls down. Like, how many times have we hit that wall and gone, oh well. Yeah.
Gary, just one thing, and I'm not taking, but you remember the question was asked, why do they send spy? Joshua sent spy.
Yeah.
So spying is, as he says, a soldier. You want to see what's going on. You know? So there's nothing wrong if you, Gary, go and buy a piece of land. You're not just going to pay your money and don't walk the land and see what the land look like. You know what I'm saying? But so Joshua sends spy. But hear what Rahab said, the nation, the same nation that the 10 spies said were giant, they were trembling. They hear Israel coming and they start.
They would have done the same thing whenever the 12 spies were there too.
Yeah.
It was fresher on their mind.
Yes.
They had just heard about how God had brought them out of Egypt.
I'm telling you.
Would it have been the same thing had they gone, had they just pressed in with a little more with some faith?
Just one thing, quickly, okay, sorry. You know, we as humans, the more fear is in our heart, the bigger the mountain.
Amen.
That we see.
Yes.
We can make
But
it huge.
the question is, where the rubber meets the road is how big is your God?
Amen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
What you focus on is what's going to be bigger.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Amen.
I'm gonna have to skip some of this.
No, really.
But I want to get to.
You're just like Joey.
I want to get to some of this back here.
That's all right.
We're gonna skip down to verse 26 and read down through 35. I better get through. I was about to read 15, 26 through 35. That would make no sense to you whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
I got it right here. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation, who are grumbling against me? And I have heard the complaints of the son of Israel, that they are making against me. Say to them, As I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will surely do. What had God is making an oath. I mean, whenever we make an oath, we swear by God. But whenever God makes an oath, he swears by himself. There is no power over God. That's the top of the ladder right there. So God's going to make an oath that's going to be on his, as surely as he lives. But the thing here, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so will I surely do to you. And what is it that they have been speaking in the hearing of God over and over and over?
Have brought us here to die.
In the wilderness. Right, exactly. So what they were saying mattered. What they were speaking and proclaiming mattered. God was listening. God heard it. And whenever they pushed God too far, he said, okay, you're going to get what you've been asking. Right? So be careful what you ask for. Now in verse 30, Adonai kind of qualifies his oath. Surely you shall not come into the land in which I swore to you, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Because of their faith, they were an exception to what God was about to proclaim. God didn't proclaim it. The children of Israel proclaimed it upon themselves. God just said, I'm going to do what you've been saying. But since there's faith in Caleb and Joshua, you will be exempt from that. You will eventually get to enter into the land. And then we get to 39 through 45. And when Moses spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, the people mourned greatly. In the morning, however, they rose up early and went to the ridge of the hill country, saying, Here we are, we have indeed sinned, but we will go up in the place which the Lord has promised. But Moses said, part of the portion that we skipped in here is where God told them, hey, you're going back into the wilderness. He didn't tell them to go on, and once he pardoned their sin, he didn't tell them to go on and take the land. He gave them other instruction. So again, in what they're trying to justify in their mind that they're going to obey God, it's absolute rebellion again. It's still rebellion.
Amen.
And Moses said, Why then are you transgressing the commandment of the Lord when it will not succeed? Do not go up lest you be struck down before your enemies. For the Lord is not among you. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites will be there in front of you, and you will fall by the sword, inasmuch as you have turned back from following the Lord, and the Lord will not be with you. But they went up heedlessly to the ridge of the hill country. Neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses left the camp. So they're going to strike out, and they're going to try to do it through those eyes that they were looking at, those in themselves. They were going to do it within themselves. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, that represents the presence of God going before them. They left that in the camp. They didn't have God's presence whenever they entered into that. They left they had no leadership. It doesn't even say who led them into that battle.
Right.
They had no leadership. Moses stayed in the camp. So if you're going to strike out and try to do battle on behalf of God, make sure you take the presence of God with you.
That'd be a good idea.
And I hope I can squeeze all this in here. I mean, you know, looking back through this whole story, I kind of try to put myself there. What would I have done? Which side would I have fallen on? And I, like I say, man, I would have been right there with Joshua and Caleb, because you've witnessed, you've been brought out of slavery. You've been miraculously provided for. You've been miraculously protected.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, I've been freed from slavery. I've been provided for. I've been protected.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And still, I wander in the wilderness.
Amen to that.
And I don't know if I had time to go through all this.
Yes, you
I'm
do.
going to give just a little bit of testimony.
Yes. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
I have to get a drink of water. I'm 50 years old. 1992, I felt the call to preach. I was married, had two kids at the time. And so, 1992, I entered Bible school. I went to Southwestern Assembly of God University in Waxahachie. Spent a year and a half in Bible school. I began to get opportunities to preach. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to take the Ark of the Covenant. Oops.
Okay.
I thought I could do it with what I'd learned in Bible school. Nothing wrong with Bible school. It's good. Going to university, getting trained to speak is a good thing. But at some point, I got to where I can do this. I can do this. I can do it. And it was a bust. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. Inadequate. And what did I do? I said, God, how could you let this happen? I grumbled.
It's okay.
I said, I'm never doing this. I'm never getting up in front of people and speaking.
Come on.
Like it all. And I've turned into a big crybaby.
Look like you're in front of people speaking.
It looks like it. But I wandered in that wilderness saying, God, I'll serve you and I'll serve you faithfully. And I'll do this. But don't you ask me to speak in front of people. Don't do it, God. Don't go there. Don't do it. So I go through 25 years of this. 25 years of a wilderness experience. But God's still there. There's still some training. There's still some stuff going on in my life. There's a lot of things that I had to bury in that wilderness before I could come out.
Amen.
And so we come to last fall, and we get to it was the day, the Shabbat before we had Kardaim, and we go to lunch after Shabbat with a couple, and we're just sitting there eating. And I've spent these 25 years saying, God, I'll do anything, but don't you ever ask me to speak. And And he looks across the table at me out of the blue. He said, "You're supposed to preach." And I threw my hands up and I said, that hurts. I'm scared. I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. And the rest of the night, after we left, was a wrestling match. And I lost.
You won.
And the next day I went to Cardenas and I shared some of this with Joey, and I kind of told him what was going on. And then through my studies, God started speaking. He said, this is a word I want you to share.
Come on, brother. Come on.
And I didn't share that with anybody. I didn't share it with Christy. And she saw that I was writing and studying and putting stuff together. And Joey was planning a trip to Israel the first of the year. And God spoke to me and said, "You're going to preach." And I said, "Okay, we'll see." And so we got to the Shabbat before Joey was going to leave, and he announced, and he says, Hal is going to preach, and he said somebody else is going to preach. And I said, "Well, God, I guess that's not, was that really your voice I was hearing? Was that it?" And I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything to anybody. And the next morning, I wake up to a text message from Joey, "Can you speak on the next Shabbat?" And I said, "Yes, yes." But it took 25 years of walking in that
Really
wilderness.
is. Come on.
Sealing it up, going back and making sure it was still packaged up and not getting out. Because there was pain, there was fear, there was hurt, and it had to be buried before I could come out.
Mm.
So here we are right now. God is good. I don't know. I don't have all the answers on where He's going to take me and Christy. I don't have to have all the answers.
Amen.
If he says you're going to speak, then you're going to speak.
That's right. That's
And
right.
if He says you're going to do this, then you're going to do
That's
this.
right. Amen.
Whatever your purpose is,
That's right.
He will.
be ready and have the faith to go into the promised
That's
land.
right.
Not just to live, but to fulfill
That's right.
your purpose that God has placed on your heart.
Come on.